One thing you will immediately notice about this presentation is that there is no PowerPoint presentation. So there's just me and the surrounding vicinity to look at. So today I'm going to basically be speaking about exactly what is the pro-life position. So if someone asked you, what does it mean to be pro-life, what would you say? So we're going to have a look at that. We're going to look at some bad ways that people argue for abortion. We're going to look at what the case is against relativism, what relativism is, and how to handle some objections that people ask. So there will be some slight overlap with what people have said throughout the day, but if I do touch on some of those things, I'll try and add a slightly different spin. So as I said, welcome, and you've probably attended what is probably the most politically incorrect conference today going on, so congratulations, good job. So you already got a good start for pro-life activism, so I'm sure there are lots of other things going on today. A little bit more about me. So my name's Daniel. I am married. Been married for 4 years. My wife's expecting our first baby in 7 weeks, which is super exciting, but really scary. It's like this equal fear and excitement. But so that's really exciting. I work in the NHS. I work at St Thomas's, just across the river, whichever way, that way, I think, across the river. And I work at the Children's Hospital there. So I work in the operating theatres just with children. I work at the Children's Hospital part of St Thomas's. And so I've worked at a hospital before where I've had to appeal to my right for conscientious objection to not be part of abortions. The hospital where I trained at did abortions, so I had to have a sort of awkward conversation with my boss about that. And so, yeah, I work with children. I work with neonates as well, so I see children from 23 weeks, sometimes younger, tiny little people. And so when I read about, these sorts of 22, 23, 24 weeks, I have a picture in my head about, the sorts of beings that we're talking about. I also doing my master's in moral philosophy part-time, so I'm just writing my dissertation at the moment, which is on what makes human beings valuable, especially looking at the human embryo. So is the human embryo a person? Are they morally valuable? Is it morally permissible to use them for research and destroy them in the process? So in the Q&A time, I'm more than happy to, if anyone's got any questions specifically about the human embryo, I'm more than happy to go through that. Aside from that, I make a habit of, I wasn't always a Christian. I was an atheist until I was 20. I've been a Christian now for the last 9 years. And so the whole idea that the Christian worldview makes sense is very important to me. And so we've heard the word apologetics brought up a little bit today. So I'll just say exactly for those who don't know what it is, what apologetics is. Apologetics is just derived from a Greek word, apologia, and that simply means to give a defense. So today we've been looking at being trained in pro-life apologetics, and that simply means just to give a defense for being pro-life when people have objections to that view. So if you're a Christian, you should be practicing Christian apologetics, so that if someone asks you a question about why you're a Christian, or they have objections to the Christian worldview, you can then offer an apologetic, a reason for believing that it's true. I also work for Life Training Institute as well, which is Scott Klissendorf. He runs that, and they basically just train pro-life ambassadors, and he's spoken at this conference for the last couple of years. And I will do a bit of a book plug, because if anyone hasn't read The Case for Life, he wrote a book called The Case for Life, the book I just mentioned, by Scott Klissendorf, and it's a fantastic overview of what exactly the pro-life position is, how to defend it, how to respond to objections. And I'm not saying it's the best introduction just because I know him and like him. It genuinely is. I've tried to get my hands on the sort of best sort of books available, and I would say that it is the best book that you can kind of get. And it's about £5 on Amazon, £2 postage and packaging. I actually have 2 copies in my bag, which I'm willing to sell to the most eager buyer for £5, no P&P. So it's fine, save £2, which is great. So this may seem an obvious question, but what does it mean to be pro-life? What exactly is the pro-life position? We've heard pro-life talked about a lot today, but if someone asked you, what is pro-life? Not why you are pro-life, but what is it to be pro-life? The pro-life position is simply this, that it is as morally wrong to kill pre-born humans as it is born humans. So if the reason for killing a pre-born human wouldn't justify killing a born human, then it remains morally wrong. So as has been pointed out earlier, if someone is struggling financially to provide for an infant, it would be wrong to kill them, and it would be wrong to use the same justifications to kill a pre-born human being. It also entails that we have a right to life from the moment that we begin to exist, and it's not something that we acquire at a later date through some sort of property. And not everyone here today is a Christian, which is great, because the pro-life position is not only a Christian position. I think the Christian worldview best supports the pro-life case, such as human equality, but the only requirement for being treated equally as a human is being human, and rather than some acquired property. And being human is something, obviously, that the preborn are, from the moment they begin to exist to the time they die, at whatever stage of human development that might be. And our history throughout is a human history. There's no point at any point of our development where we are not human. From the moment we exist, we are human, and through whatever time we are here on this earth, it is a human history that we have. And if this isn't the case, if human equality isn't based in something that we share equally, as in being human, then there is no such thing as human equality. It doesn't exist. It might be something to aspire for, but there is nothing, no foundation to base human equality upon. So something I noticed in online pro-life debates, and when I've spoken to people about abortion, and they say, well, they're just a fetus. They're not you're calling them a baby or an unborn child, but they're not. They're just a fetus. And what people like that intend to do is they're trying to, what Andy was talking about earlier, was trying to dehumanize the unborn. And what it demonstrates, they don't actually understand the term themselves. So a fetus simply means, it's from a Latin word that means offspring or young. So it's simply a normal stage of human development. So it's no more dehumanizing to call someone a human fetus as it is to call them a human infant or a human adult. It's not dehumanizing. It's a normal stage of healthy human development. But so we're quite within our rights to refer to the unborn child or an unborn baby. It's a colloquial term that we use. You can read in any dictionary, and it will give you have the justification to use it for a born child or baby or an unborn child or baby. So we don't need to fall into the trap of being too technical about what terms we use. So rather than assumptions, the pro-life position is supported by good arguments that justify holding the position, and it's a far more consistent way to understand the respect that we have for human life. So these arguments that support the basis of the pro-life position are this. For example, such that the preborn are human beings. And the science of embryology tells us that this is the case, because from the earliest stages of human development, the preborn are distinct, living, and whole human beings. So we didn't come from an embryo, we once were an embryo, and thus we don't develop into humans, but as humans. Philosophy also tells us that there's no essential difference between the embryo that we once were and the mature adult that we are today that would justify killing us at that stage of development. And as Aisling was saying earlier, we can use the SLED acronym. So as we were talking about, these differences between the preborn and the born are size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. And but these reasons don't justify killing us now, but not then. So if you had a right to life today, it can't be the case you didn't have one back then. And so I really recommend memorizing the SLED acronym, because it's a great way to have discussions with people and to make sure that every time you have a discussion with someone about abortion, they're hearing a very clear, systematic defense of why we believe abortion is wrong. And I love books, so I will do another book plug. The SLED acronym comes from a philosopher called Stephen Schwartz, and he wrote a book called The Moral Question of Abortion. And I looked it up on Amazon. You can get it for 69p secondhand. So I really recommend getting that book. It's a fantastic, systematic defense of the pro-life position, and unfortunately it's out of print. So maybe if we all start buying it again, they'll start printing more copies. So before we look at relativism, what are some of the common and popular ways that people in our culture argue for abortion? And actually, before we go into that, some people don't actually care what arguments you give. Like, they are so ideologically opposed to the pro-life position that you could give the best philosophical defense, the clearest premises and conclusions to someone, and they just don't care. And that's when the abortion images come into their own, because you can't argue with the picture. You can argue with the arguments we give if you're ideologically opposed to it, but you can't argue with the fact that abortion is a horrible, violent act. So, what are some of the ways that people argue badly for abortion? Well, the first thing they do is they assume rather than argue. So most people arguing by assuming something about the unborn. That is, they assume that they aren't human. So they'll try and use terms that are dehumanizing to describe them, or that they aren't fully human yet, and it wouldn't be wrong to kill them at that particular point. So an example of this would be, as was brought up earlier, would be back alley abortions. But again, regardless of the question, the assumption is that the unborn aren't human and don't have their own right to life. And our job as good pro-life ambassadors is to gently and respectfully expose these assumptions and the question begging that people often bring to their arguments. The second one is this: that they assert rather than argue, and assertions aren't arguments. For instance, so Peter Singer, in my dissertation, I'm looking at Peter Singer, who's probably the most influential pro-choice philosopher in the world. And the funny thing is that a lot of people who are pro-choice haven't even heard of him. And another thing a lot of people say, they say, well, what goes on in the universities stays in the universities. It doesn't trickle down into society. But Peter Singer is a really good example of why that's actually false, because a lot of the views that a lot of our secular culture hold on abortion are Peter Singer's ideas, not just on abortion, but on infanticide, on poverty, on what it means to be human, on euthanasia, on the whole moral outlook to ethics. And so we can't negate having these sorts of intellectual dialogues at university, because they do affect real life. They don't just stay in the kind of ivory tower of Princeton where Peter Singer is. And he makes assertions like this. He says that species membership is not morally relevant. Well, I like to say that actually it is morally relevant. If you're driving home one night say I'm driving home one night and I run over a hedgehog, I like hedgehogs. I would be a little bit sad, but I would still sleep okay that evening. If I was driving home and there was a small infant in the road and I run over an infant, I would be absolutely distraught. I might not ever get over it in my whole life. So at least in that instance, species membership is morally relevant. It does matter what when we're talking about killing and these sorts of debates that we're having. So one way we can kind of expose the assertion being asked is we can ask someone, so why should I believe a thing like that? What are your reasons for thinking that's true? So if someone says, well, species membership it's not relevant, well, why? Why do you think that's the case? And why should I believe that? Another thing they do is they say, well, they attack rather than argue. So I've heard this many times, and they say, well, you're a man. You can't have a view. As if, what right do I have to tell a woman about anything about abortion or the value of unborn human beings? Or they say, well, how many kids have you adopted? What right do you have to tell me anything when you haven't adopted all these children? And what these sorts of questions are to do, I wouldn't take it too personally, because they do it to anyone who held your view. But they're all attempts to deflect the uncomfortable truth of abortion, of what it actually does, and the horrible nature of its act. They're just deflections. And so what you can do is, well, you could ask, you say, well, suppose that what you say about me is true. How does that refute my case about the unborn being fully human and elective abortion being wrong? Because it doesn't do anything. So I just have a sip of water. And the other thing, if you're a man and someone says, what right do you have to tell me anything? Well, you can say, well, actually, women make exactly the same points that I've just made. So if a woman was next to me saying exactly the same thing as I said, would you take them more seriously than me? And I think that says a lot more about their sort of ideological beliefs rather than the strength of their arguments. And some people, number 4, they hide behind hard cases such as rape. And I think you always have to be very sensitive about it. Rape is like the most horrible, vile thing one of the most vile things another human being can do to another person. And so we do have to be very sensitive. But I find that there's the two most common types of people that ask this question are the inquirer, someone who's very genuine, and the crusader who just wants to appeal to the hard cases and try and make you look silly. So if we're talking to an inquirer, I might start by asking, well, how should a civilized society treat innocent human beings that remind us of a painful event? Because some cultures, Middle Eastern cultures, it might be normal to kill the mother. But instead, in our civilized society, we don't kill the mother, we kill the child. So it's an important question to raise. How should a civilized society deal with innocent human beings that remind us of a painful event? Now, if we have the crusader, someone who just wants to try and make you look silly, and you can kind of expose what they're doing by asking some questions. So you could say, right, well, suppose I grant your objection that abortion should be legal in instances of rape. So if I agree with you, are you willing to commit and admit that all other instances of abortion are wrong? And what you'll find is usually they'll say no. That's because rape isn't the issue why they're against abortion. There are certain assumptions and beliefs that they have that justify that, but bringing up rape is a way, again, to try and deflect from the real issue about what is the nature of the unborn human being, and are they valuable. The 5th thing they do is they advance a false view of moral and legal neutrality. So moral neutrality is actually, it's impossible. Both pro-life and abortion choice people are asking the same exact questions. What makes human beings valuable in the first place? And state neutrality is impossible. It's impossible for a state to be neutral about abortion, because the law even recognises that the preborn are valuable and human beings, and thus protects them, or it doesn't and permits killing them. It's either one or the other. There's no middle ground. You can't be neutral about killing people. You either make it possible or you make it impossible. So, back to my sort of main point. So the case against relativism. So let's look at two different claims. Claim A is this: chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream. And so that would be an example of a subjective truth claim, an appeal to tastes or preferences. The second claim is this: it's wrong to torture babies for fun. So that's the opposite of a subjective claim. That's an objective claim. And that statement is true in spite of people's preferences or tastes. So, as I said, the first is an individual preference claim. The other is an objective moral claim. And that moral claim tells us two things. It gives us a moral rule: don't torture babies. And it gives us a moral value: it is bad to torture babies for fun. And And when we make objective claims, we're saying that it would be wrong to torture babies for fun in all places, in all times, to all people, regardless of what an individual or a culture might think about that. So, why is this significant? Why are we talking about relativism? And it's because many people today don't know the difference between these two types of claims, the ones I mentioned above. At a street level, when we're having one-to-one dialogue with people, relativism is one of the sort of single biggest challenges that we'll encounter to the pro-life view. So what is relativism? Well, relativism is what is right and wrong is up to us to decide, either individually or as a society. There are no objective standards that we hold that can be independent of our tastes or preferences. So an example of moral relativism would be, I imagine you've heard this before, I'm personally against abortion, but I think that it should be legal. I don't want it to be illegal. I don't want to impose my moral preferences on other people. And so something that we could ask is, well, what is it about abortion that you are against? They must be against something. They must acknowledge something bad about the act, because they've just said that they're personally against it. So there's not many things I'm personally against that I think are good things. So it doesn't really make sense. So it's like saying I'm personally against setting fire to illegal immigrants' houses, but I don't want to make that black and white. I don't want it to be illegal. So it doesn't make sense. It's a really strange view to hold. So there are 4 types of relativism. The first 3 are common, and the last one is quite rare, so you might only encounter it on a university campus. So the first one is society does relativism. And so what that means is that the absence of consensus means an absence in truth. So yeah, it doesn't follow that because people disagree that nothing is right. People have disagreed about slavery. Did that mean that nobody was right about it? Society does relativism is descriptive and not prescriptive. That is, it only describes what culture does, not what it ought to do. The second one is society says relativism. So each society determines right and wrong for itself. What's right for one society may not be right for another, and morality is reduced to a kind of social contract and is determined by popular consensus rather than any overarching moral rule. And if this is true, then there can be no such thing as an immoral society or an immoral law, because if a particular society chooses to enslave women or practice racial genocide, who are we as outsiders of that society to judge? Can't judge them. And this is exactly what the Nazis did to defend their actions in the Nuremberg trials, claiming they had simply followed orders within the framework of their own societal and legal system, one that varied from outside nations. And if society is the final measure of morality, then all of its judgments are moral by definition. So those who oppose those judgments, that is, moral reformers, the sorts of people that you want to be, people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi are therefore immoral. They're immoral because society can't actually be improved. It can only be changed. You can't, you can only change it. You can't improve it if relativism is true. The third one of the most common ones, is that I say relativism. So morality is simply up to the individual. I determine right and wrong for myself. Meaning no one has the right to judge me, and the common expression of this is that, who are you to force your morals on me? And that's an example of this kind of relativism. So if I say relativism is true, then there can be no such thing as an immoral individual, because if I say I'm a moral being, if I say I'm morally right, then I am morally right. And this is extremely common in our society because if you haven't noticed, Western society, especially in the UK, is the most individualistic and selfish society that's ever been in existence. We are, as individuals, the centre of our universe. And it's very, very difficult to prove, to try and maybe encourage people that might not be the case. And if you've tried, you'll know how difficult that is. The fourth one, as I said, is a bit obscure. You might just hear it at university, and that's basically, I can't say relativism. So people will say that objective moral rules may exist, but you can never know them because we can't really understand language properly, and our sense perceptions don't allow us to really know moral truths. But as I said, you're unlikely to hear that, and it's a bit obscure. I'm going to move on very swiftly. So, 4 reasons why relativism is seriously flawed. Relativism is self-defeating. That is, it can't live by its own rules. If someone claims morality is personal, then that emphatically states that that personal morals must be kept personal and freedom of choice must be respected. But then I want to ask, well, says who? Is that their view? If so, who are they to push their personal views on pro-lifers who disagree with them? And we have to remember, the person who says you shouldn't judge just judged you. So they're guilty of committing the thing they're saying is wrong. So it's completely internally flawed. So the person who claims you shouldn't force your views on others just force their view on you. Flaw number 2. Relativism can't say anything, why anything is wrong, including intolerance. So if morals are relative to our culture or an individual, there's no real ethical difference between Hitler and Mother Teresa. They just had different preferences. One preferred one thing, another preferred another. Who are we to say who was a better person? And the latter, as I said, the latter like to help people, while the former like to kill them. It's just up to them. It's the difference of one preferring chocolate and the other vanilla. So who are we to judge? But such a view is counterintuitive. Like there's something about that we sort of has some sort of intuitive appeal that it might be mistaken. And that's because we know the difference between starving a child and feeding him. They're 2 very morally different actions. Greg Koukl has this thing. He says that relativists find themselves in this unenviable position of having to admit that there's no such thing as evil, justice, fairness, and no obligation of tolerance. Think of it this example. Imagine you're transported back to the 18th century onto a slave plantation in the Caribbean. And a slave master is keeping multiple slaves there, working them to death for his profit. And so you want to challenge, you're a relativist, and you want to challenge the slave master. And you go up to him and say, look, I think what you're doing is morally outrageous. You shouldn't be doing that. And the slave master would simply say, well, if you don't like slavery, don't own one. So it kind of removes any possibility for promoting justice and removes any basis for condemning injustice, which are quite integral to life. Because even relativists they say they like to promote justice and condemn injustice, and yet they completely remove the foundation for having any basis to do that. So flaw number 3, relativists inevitably make moral judgments. If the relativist thinks it's wrong to judge, how can he say that pro-lifers are mistaken in the first place? Isn't he just pushing his socially conditioned view on me? So whenever a relativist says to you, you shouldn't force your views on others, the first thing out of your mouth should be, why not? Any answer given will be an example of him forcing his views on you. So, the 4th and final flaw, relativism is not neutral. Some relativists, echoing political philosopher John Rawls, hope to convey a kind of more sophisticated claim, namely that society should confer a large degree of liberty, but they shouldn't legislate on controversial moral issues when there isn't any sort of consensus throughout society, especially if those issues involve comprehensive moral doctrines based on moral assumptions and commitments. So things like embryonic stem cell research, the government shouldn't restrict it and just let people choose. They can support it if they wish. So to say government should remain neutral on these sorts of questions is itself they should refrain from moral questions is itself a moral claim. And so we don't have a consensus on divisive matters like embryonic stem cell research, but we also didn't have any consensus on matters like slavery and racism, because they were also controversial issues. So we're saying that society shouldn't make any judgment on that. I'll leave you to decide. So, how do we handle objections? So, I can imagine talking about abortion, it does put you in the hot seat sometimes to a lot of interesting questions, sometimes aggression, and it would be helpful to maybe know some ways about how we can kind of graciously and persuasively sort of handle those objections. And this is significant, not because I think a lot of pro-life ambassadors, people who support the pro-life position, we tend to assume the burden of proof when we shouldn't necessarily do that. For instance, if I claim that there's a pink elephant hanging from the exit sign at the back, I was hoping someone would look, but you didn't. That's all right. You've already seen it, okay. It's not up to you to refute me because I'm the one that made the claim and I should have to prove it. So I made the claim, therefore I'm the one that bears the burden of proof. So when you're under fire, you can get back in the driver's seat by asking these three key questions. And Greg Koukl wrote a book called Tactics, and it's basically for Christian evangelism, but it's also applicable to the pro-life case. And he has these three questions, which he calls the Colombo questions. And if I imagine most people know who Colombo is? No? If not, put it into YouTube, it will be hilarious. So he's basically a sort of bumbling detective who just looks completely incompetent, doesn't have a clue what he's doing, but he really does. So that's how he sort of lures you in. You think he's completely incompetent, but he's actually super awesome as a detective, and he always gets his man. So so the goal is to. Our goal really is not to dominate the discussion, but to try and clarify the discussion. That should be one of our goals. And what we want to do really is kind of leave, as we would in evangelism for those who are Christians, we kind of want to leave a stone in someone's shoe. So even after the conversation's ended, you're still like, when you get a stone in your shoe, I'm not going to act it out. You've all been there. But you want people thinking about the discussion that we've had, and that's what these three questions are really good at doing. So these three questions are: what do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? And have you considered the implications of your view? So the first one is, what do you mean by that? And the purpose of that really is to gather information so you can accurately understand our critic's view. And the question alone sort of often disarms the challenge that people are offering. So let me give you some examples. So say someone brings up the idea that embryonic stem cell research is very promising, that it's going to, in 10 years' time, people who have been left unable to walk through some sort of injury, they'll be walking, and people with Parkinson's will be healed, and all these sorts of claims. So what you could say is, well, how so? In what way is embryonic stem cell more promising than adult stem cell research, which is already treating 80+ diseases? And I'm not sure if you saw the article a few days ago. There was the BBC News website covered a story where, I think it was in Poland, where a man who had been, was he stabbed? I think he might have been stabbed, and was unable to walk for several years. And after using adult stem cells taken from his nasal cavity, he's now able to walk, which is amazing. So, and there are numerous examples of where adult stem cells are being far more actually delivering, rather than just promising results, are actually delivering results. So I want to clarify that. So pro-lifers force their view on others. Really? How so? Any more than someone who supports abortion rights? Embryos are just a mass of cells. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by a mass of cells? Did you read that in an embryology textbook? Because I didn't mean to be cheeky, but because I've read embryology textbook, never anywhere in any embryology textbook is the embryo ever referred to as a clump of cells, and again that's part of their sort of ideological belief rather than one based in any sort of facts or reality. Someone might say, I have a right to choose. Choose what? What exactly? Like, women can choose who they want to marry or what they want to have for breakfast, or choose where you go to university, or what we have to clarify, what is the choice? We're not anti-choice. We're for people to have choices, but there are certain choices that people shouldn't be able to make, whether they're a male or a female. So, if I want to have the choice to beat my child, well, it depends what the choice is. So that should be illegal you shouldn't be able to do that whether you're a man or a woman. So you have to clarify what is the choice we're talking about, because pro-life, I think a lot of pro-choice people want to kind of propose this view that people who are pro-life are anti-choice, but we're not. We just want to clarify what the choice is. And if the choice is something immoral, then it is immoral regardless. So another question someone might ask is, women have a fundamental right to abortion. Well, I want to claim, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by fundamental? Because, the way I understand fundamental is that we don't have a fundamental right to abortion. We have a fundamental right to life. I don't think there's anything about human nature where you could conclude that we have a fundamental right to kill our unborn children. But again, we want to put them into the hot seat rather than leave ourselves there. So the second question, as Colombo, how did you come to that conclusion? So the purpose of this is really to reverse the burden of proof and get us out of the hot seat. And it forces critics to kind of give reasons for their claims. So, no one, for instance, when someone says, no one can say which beliefs are right and wrong, then I want to ask, then why should I believe you? Why should I believe you? And like relativism, it completely undoes itself if you take it too seriously. You can be, why do you believe that? It forces abortion choice advocates to give evidence and justification for their claims. It puts them in the hot seat. Another claim might be thousands of women died from illegal abortion before 1967. Oh, how do you know that? Do you have any of the data that you'd be able to show me? And that's why it's important for both of us, actually. So if we make claims about how many abortions are going on, I think it's very important that actually we have the data to back up these claims that we're making. If we're going to say that abortion leaves women psychologically damaged and 80% of the time, then we need to be able to appeal to the papers, understand these papers, and actually be able to explain it, because I think as pro-life we should have high standards of understanding the data and the evidence that supports our position, because we actually do expect the same from pro-choice people. We expect them, when they make a claim, we want them to back it up with evidence, and it's only fair that we should have the same standards for ourselves. So fetuses are not self-aware. I said, well, why is self-awareness value given? What is it about being self-aware that suddenly that makes it wrong to kill you? Pro-lifers just want to prosecute women who have abortions. And so I say, well, what's wrong with a law that says you can't kill innocent human beings? And if you do, there will be consequences. It seems relatively fair to me. If the consequences fit the crime, why are they unfair? So again, it's just trying to ask questions and kind of change the, take yourself out from the firing line, as it were. The third Colombo question is this, is have you considered the implications of your view? And the purpose of this is to show that your critic must pay a high price to hold his view. So examples of this will be, you shouldn't judge. As I said earlier, have you considered that you just did that yourself? Fetuses have no right to life because they're not self-aware. And I like this one, because working in the NHS, I work with lots of
trainee doctors and consultants as well. And so I always tell them what I'm doing, like, I'm doing my dissertation about the embryo and what makes it wrong to kill them. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, a bit weird, but interesting. And so I have really great discussions. So as I think Callum appealed to earlier, is appealing to like infanticide. So I kind of explain, I say, well, see, Peter Singer, he's this guy that I'm looking at, and I'm kind of criticizing his views. And they're like, oh, so what are Peter Singer's views? He says, well, basically, nothing magic happens as you travel down the birth canal. And so you are essentially the same being that you were when you were in the womb and you are when you're born. No magics happen, no one flicks a switch and is suddenly a valuable person. And he basically says that, you know, the reasons that we give for abortion should equally be the case when they're born. And they're like, oh, that's disgusting. They're like, yeah, I think it is as well. And I said, so what do you think about abortion? They're like, oh, well, it should be legal. Okay. So what's the difference? I said, you know, the preborn aren't self-aware. They have no concept of self, that they exist. They lack these other sort of value-given properties that a lot of pro-choice philosophers think are integral for being valued as a person, it being wrong to kill them. And I say, well, you know, it's exactly the same. The newborn infant isn't in a different position. So I say, and they're sort of like, oh, I guess that sort of makes sense. And I say, oh, okay, so, but you think infanticide is wrong because even though they're the same being, they've just changed their kind of geography. And then they're like, yeah. And I'm like, do you not think that's a bit weird? And they're, well, I suppose it is actually, because it doesn't really make sense. So what you're saying is that I have to accept that if infanticide is wrong, abortion must be wrong, or if I think abortion is right, infanticide must be right. I guess that's a good way to understand what I'm saying, yeah. They're like, oh, I have to think about that a bit more. So, they usually start trying to, as I said, they try and refute some of the arguments that Peter Singer makes, even though they actually agree that abortion should be legal. And Francis Schaeffer he calls this, what I was doing is taking the roof off. And Schaeffer calls it taking the roof off because what people do is they put a roof on themselves to protect them from the kind of points of tension that arise from their assumptions or presuppositions. And so what you're basically trying to do is make people aware of this point of contention. And this point of contention is that if you think that abortion is morally permissible for the reasons that you give, then infanticide must also be morally permissible. And so, as I said, you're trying to point out this point of contention, encourage them to change their view, because if your view isn't consistent and you're morally uncomfortable with it, then that might be a hint that view may be mistaken and a wrong view to hold. So, putting this together, these three Colombo questions, how will we reply to critics? And so I'll just use these three questions to kind of look at some of the common questions that people ask us. So objection number one, then people might say, well, laws can't stop all abortions. And so I want to say, well, do you mean all or most? The second one, I can say, well, how do you know most women won't obey the law? Have you considered that laws against rape don't stop all rapes, but they do stop most of them? And why should it be any different with abortion? So that's a good way we can use those three Colombo questions to kind of respond to those questions. Another one, and I'm sure Andy gets this sometimes, is, well, your abortion pictures are fake. They're not real. You just made them up. You're saying that's a 7-week embryo. I don't think it is. My teacher told me that we're just a clump of cells for months. So I'd say, you could ask them, you say, well, which ones? Given you think these abortion pictures are fake, what do you think real abortion pictures look like? That is, how do actual abortion, what you think actual abortion pictures are, how do they differ from the ones we're showing you? If you aren't sure what real abortion pictures look like, how do you know that these ones are fake? Because I doubt very few pro-choice people know what an actual abortion picture looks like. So they have no basis for saying that the ones we use are actually not real. And have you considered that if abortion is okay, these pictures shouldn't actually bother us? And that was brought up earlier. If abortion is, a fundamental right that we all have access to, then pictures shouldn't really bother us. Another objection, embryos have no desire to go on living, and thus they have no right to life. So we could respond by saying, well, you speak of desire. Do you mean one that I'm consciously aware of? A second point could be, why must I have conscious desires for something before I can justly lay claim to it? That is, why is having a conscious desire value giving in the property? What is it about having conscious desires that suddenly makes me a morally valuable person? Some people might have desires to a higher degree, so that would entail that those people are more morally valuable than those who have less desires. Have you considered that a slave can be conditioned not to desire his freedom, yet he's still entitled it in virtue of his humanity? And what if my desire to live is greater than your desire? Does that mean I have a greater right to life than you? And this is a common one I get from Christians sometimes. They say, well, the Bible is silent on abortion, so, can we really say that abortion is wrong? So we could say, well, to our Christian friends, we can say, what do you mean by silent? Do you mean that the word isn't mentioned anywhere, or that we can't draw conclusions from what else is written there? Are you saying that whatever the Bible doesn't expressly condemn, that it actually condones? So if it doesn't condemn something, then God must be telling us that it's perfectly acceptable. If not, what's your point? Because they already accept that, but they're just kind of using abortion as an example. Not a very good example. The second question, tell me why you think the biblical authors don't mention abortion by name. What are your reasons for thinking their alleged silence actually justifies abortion? Have you considered that the Bible doesn't condemn many things by name, including female infanticide, drink driving, drive-by shootings? But we wouldn't say that makes them okay just because the Bible is kind of silent on drive-by shootings, that there's sort of a silent argument that it's perfectly fine to do Christian drive-by shootings. That's kind of the end of what I was going to talk about, relativism. I did want to bring up something quickly. Someone brought up about overpopulation. Now, someone's brought this up to me before, and I'd asked my friend, I said, so, this is like, you seriously believe this, that abortion is kind of justified because of overpopulation? And he's like, yeah, I'm deadly serious about it. Okay. So I said, are you so serious that you would be willing to not have sex for the rest of your life? Because obviously, look, we're already overpopulated, and you shouldn't be doing anything that could possibly add to this already overburdened planet. And I could tell a bit uncomfortable. And I said, you're also so serious that you would be willing you would lay down your life yourself. I said, because why should you expect someone else to suffer and to take the burden off the planet? I said, if you're this serious about it, you should be the one willing to sacrifice yourself. And that was kind of the end of a very, very short discussion. So that's kind of me finished, really.